Hey, welcome back to the Spector Creative channel. I'm your host, Toy Guru Neitlich, and I've been in the toy industry for over 25 years as a collector and as a, toy maker. And one of the things I did at Mattel while I was there was I really worked on San Diego Comic-Con and kind of trying to really drive the experience. I did this in a lot of ways with a fantastic team. One of them was introducing more things into the booth to take pictures of and hang out with. And well, besides having beautiful women dressed as characters, another initiative I really pushed for was creating dioramas to show off all of the exciting toy lines we were doing. No one had really ever done this on that scale before, and I thought it would be a great way to, take existing art and have it come alive as action figures like we did for the Motu 30th anniversary, taking an old cross-sell poster and making action figures out of it, or building actual dioramas and, sort of play sets that we weren't really ever going to get to, or at least didn't have plans, but a great way to show off collections and show how massive they could be and what it would be like having a full collection of figures, something we all really wanted to have at home, and this was kind of a dream way of displaying it. So I shouldn't have been as delighted, shocked, and, surprised when the next year Hasbro showed up doing the same thing. But hey, imitation is the best form of flattery, right? Or something like that. Either way, Hasbro absolutely outdid the dioramas that I was working on at Mattel with really intricate stuff. For Marvel, for G.I. Joe, for Star Wars, they honestly really took it to the next level, and it's extremely impressive what they did with the concept of dioramas, even if we were doing it first. All right, enough of that. I know, I've got an ego, and we're actually going to get into that in a moment. Either way, their dioramas were top-notch, and one of the ones they did in particular at San Diego Comic-Con 2019, so before COVID shut everything down and postponed Comic-Con, was a Black Series Jabba's Palace with a really awesome Rancor. And the San Diego Comic-Con not this San Diego Comic-Con Rancor, although that's impressive too. I'm talking about this one, the one that was in scale to the Black Series and was incorporated into the diorama that everyone could see and ooh and ah at, but was explained as just part of the diorama and something that was there to flesh out the scene. So this was really part of the highlight of going through the Hasbro booth at Comic-Con 2019, checking out all the details. And outside of that Bib Fortuna figure, he was pretty much the only other new thing. Now what was odd, though, was Hasbro spent a lot of time showing off in their fan panel how the diorama was made. And they especially spent a lot of time talking about the Rancor. In fact, the panel basically didn't have much to say, and fans even said this was on Bleeding Cool, that they spent a really long time talking through the design process of their diorama. So why would they do this? Why spend so much time on the diorama and use up valuable fan Q&A time? Well, the reason is because the Rancor was supposed to be the next Haslab project, and that's what I want to talk about today. So let's dive in a little bit about what Haslab is all about. So it started off as a way to bring fan dream projects to life. The sail barge in 3 3/4 scale, the vintage series, is something fans were asking for years. Not every project they did, however, made it all the way to production. But the idea, at least, as communicated, was to bring fan dreams to life. Toys that we could never get otherwise without them being funded by a presale because of the high cost of tooling or lack of interest or space at retail to sell gigantic items that just don't work at big box retail. Now, the first item they did, as I mentioned, the sail barge, was something fans really, really wanted and were asking for years and really got behind as far as, campaigning. And it did okay. Well, it just squeaked by. It basically hit the bare minimum needed, and it went into production, and fans loved it and were rewarded. Their next item, Unicron, for the Transformers brand, well, it was a celebration of Transformers and the Hasbro's IP, but it kind of limped its way to the finish line. A whole bunch of unplanned sort of add-ons were thrown in kind of at the last minute, and well, because it was a Hasbro IP and they didn't want to damage the brand, at least I'm extrapolating, it kind of got a free pass and made it. Now, the Rancor, which, as I mentioned, being shown off at San Diego Comic-Con in the diorama and highlighted for almost half of the fan panel as just a diorama item, was meant to follow up the sail barge. But because the sail barge kind of just squeaked through and Unicron didn't really do well and Cookie Monster didn't make it, well, it looked like the door was going to close on the Rancor, and it was just going to be an item that was seen in the diorama. And the idea of producing it, or at least even trying to produce it using the Haslab method, was thrown out the window. Now, if there's one thing that can be said about toy makers is they have a huge ego. And I know because I have the biggest one of them all. So, in order to appease this ego of toy makers, and again, including myself, that's why so much time was spent in the fan panel on the Rancor, because since it was no longer going to be offered as a Haslab item, this was the only way all of these designers were going to get to show it off. Clearly, a ton of work had gone into this, and it had basically been reduced to a set piece from an item that was designed to go up for a pre-sale. And when a project is put on hold like that, like I said, toy makers have huge egos, and again, including myself in that. So, yeah, it was basically, all right, diorama or bust. And then something magical happened. Then the sail barge hit the secondary market. And boy, did it hit the secondary market. I mean, it was going for just, quadruple the amount, well, I guess double the amount that it had, well, no, it was like, what, $500? And now it's going for thousands. So, yeah, I mean, the margin on the secondary market, giant. And that's what unlocked the ability to do the Razor Crest, because now Hasbro was like, oh, maybe the stuff does sell. And because of the aftermarket value on the sail barge, so many people ordered the Razor Crest, and it did phenomenal, way past the minimum. It blew away the sail barge numbers completely, even without the add-on. And, all the fan extra support, like, fan clubs getting together to try to publicize the Haslab offer and giving having medals or patches, if you will, to celebrate this. So while not every item made it, and Cookie Monster really is the only one that outright failed, Hasbro was really not quite sure how to use this new power, this new fan funding. And Cookie Monster is an interesting example because it's not really something the fans were asking for. Now, speed ahead to the Sentinel from Marvel Legends. Something that fans have asked for, on and off, but we've been pretty satisfied with the ones we got. But getting this version, and with all of the unlocks and additional heads and arms and bonus figures, it did phenomenal. And it basically showed that, the outer limits. Actually, this one predated the Razor Crest, so I'm kind of out of order here. But that's not as important as the examples I'm giving, so pardon the continuity between showing these. But with the Sentinel, it's an army builder, meaning there were fans who were going to buy more than one. And that's really key, especially when looking at what Haslab is doing now and in the future. Much like things like Stormtroopers, where you're going to want a whole army, or Loki's, where you could just buy unlimited because of the multiverse, you could get a lot of Sentinels. And so clearly there were probably some people who bought more than one. I bought one, still waiting for it, but excited to get it. Looking now at the Galactus figure and looking up at this amazing figure that's coming out that's even bigger than the Sentinel and is the biggest Marvel Legends figure now that we are potentially ever going to get, 32 inches, light up chest and head and, more articulation than you can shake a stick at. He's got like 20 points of articulation and just in each hand or something like that. And he is definitely bigger than the Sentinel. Although, it's interesting they both have the same color scheme. What is it with, like, blue and purple and giant characters? I don't know. Maybe it's a Kirby thing. Well, who knows? Either way, the point is Galactus is up for pre-order, but Haslab is asking for $14,000, which is more than double what they asked for from the Sentinel for the initial offering, if you will. And this is kind of questionable, and it makes me, as a former brand manager and toy maker, really wonder, is this because of the success of others that it's feeling like, oh, well, this will do just as well. It fits the cookie cutter pattern of previous releases. For me, it's not classic Galactus. The helmet's all wrong. And personally, that's why I'm not getting one. I want classic Galactus. I don't want new modern Galactus as, in my collection. So I am passing on it. But if Haslab is going to continue and looking at the successes and failures, the items that just squeaked by, the items that didn't fund, and the items that surpassed their goals, I think there's really some key learnings here that could really be extrapolated. And going back to my ego, which is obviously the most important part of this video, I want to talk more about me and what I did. So when I was at Mattel, we had the same kind of funding mechanism that Haslab is doing on Matty Collector when we did the pre-sale for Castle Grayskull. And unlike Hasbro, I had, shall we say, very little support from upper management for this one. Haslab clearly has a lot of funding, marketing dollars, and design dollars that were given to it in order to pre-sell these items. I had basically, my own, phone camera and cardboard models. Hasbro had giant digital walkthroughs of the sail barge they were able to put together, as well as in-person dioramas to show off how beautiful it was. So, because Hasbro clearly has a major advantage that they have so much support from upper management to do these things, it feels like they should really take a closer look at what subjects or rather, toys, which SKUs they choose to focus on. Now, it kind of reads to me as Haslab is really a PR exercise. The Cookie Monster was clearly a licensor request. It was not something fans were asking for. It was done because they work with Sesame Street and the licensor wanted to put that up. The fact that Galactus needs 14,000 backers just for the basic version, not even some of the add-ons, maybe a classic head, hint hint, Hasbro, if you want me to order one. To me, that says it's more of a PR exercise than providing what it was originally intended to be, which was a conduit to get fans' dream projects, things that they always wanted, i.e. the sail barge. And if I was going to offer some unsolicited advice to Hasbro, it would be to look at what fans are actually looking for. It's not necessarily about size, and it's definitely not about what's going to garner the most amount of publicity in, Variety or other, even fan sites. Giving fans what they want to cheer for and what they're happy about is what collecting is all about. It's not about getting headlines. Now, I don't want to be all accusatory because I'm sure Hasbro's heart is in the right place, but when you're asking for 14,000 subscribers or backers for Galactus and doing licensor requests like Cookie Monster, I feel like it may be missing the emotional connection that drives collectability. And understanding that emotional connection is so important to doing adult collector product. This is me. This is me with my 3 3/4 Star Wars collection behind me, all of those figures in little drawers. I am a actual Star Wars collector, and I've also brand managed toy lines for 25 years. So I'm kind of offering, sort of free advice, if you will, from my experience, and I back that up. My company, Spector Creative, focuses on the emotional connection, not just making something that's going to follow the traditional model of hitting the most number of 4-quadrant customers. So think emotionally, whatever you're doing, whether you're Hasbro or you're your own self-made toy maker. It's all about the emotional connection. And I hope you enjoy hearing about that. Share this video if you can. It tells YouTube to share it with other people. I appreciate that, and I'll see you in the comments where I comment back every single time because I appreciate you guys watching. See you next time.